All right, let's talk about a classic IT nightmare. How do you get a brand new operating system onto a whole bunch of computers without spending your entire week or, let's be honest, losing your mind in the process?
So just picture this. You're the IT person, a huge stack of boxes with new PCs just landed on your doorstep. Your mission? Get Windows 11 up and running on every single one of them. Are you really going to walk around with a USB stick plugging it in one by one?
No way. I mean, that's just asking for trouble. It's slow, it's boring, and it's so easy to make a mistake. You click the wrong thing on one machine and suddenly your setups are all different. When you're dealing with any kind of scale, doing it by hand is just not going to fly. Thankfully, there is a much better way.
And that's where Windows Deployment Services, or WDS, comes in. The easiest way to think about it is like an automated assembly line in a factory, right? Instead of building every car piece by piece, you hit a button and the robots do all the work. WDS is basically that, but for installing Windows all across your network.
Okay, so how do we actually build this thing? Well, before we can fire up that assembly line, we have to build the factory first. And that means setting up a server that's going to be our central command center for everything.
First things first, our server needs a permanent, unchanging address on the network. We give it what's called a static IP. It's kind of like giving your factory a fixed street address. So all the other computers, the delivery trucks, know exactly where to go to get their instructions. Now, there are really three key services that have to work together as a team to make this all happen. First, you've got Active Directory. Think of it as the factory manager, keeping a list of all the computers. Then you've got DHCP, who's like the receptionist at the front desk, handing out temporary network addresses. And finally, you add the WDS role itself, our assembly line, which is going to do the heavy lifting.
So everything seems pretty straightforward up to this point, right? Set up the server, tell the computers where to look, and you're good to go. But there's a little plot twist. A pretty big catch, actually, when it comes to deploying the latest version of Windows.
And here it is the big problem. For some deep technical reasons, Windows 11 is missing a few key things that WDS has always relied on. So what that means is, if you just try to use a standard Windows 11 installation file with WDS, it just fails. The whole assembly line grinds to a halt before it even gets started.
But don't panic. This is not a deal breaker. This is where we get to be a little clever. There's an awesome workaround for this, and you'll be surprised at how simple it actually is.
So here is the secret sauce. We're going to perform a little digital bait and switch. See, WDS is perfectly happy to start a Windows 10 installation. So we give it the boot file from a Windows 10 disk to get things started, but the moment that computer boots up, we secretly swap in the real installation files from Windows 11. So WDS kicks off the job, but Windows 11 is what actually gets installed. Pretty clever, right?
And here's exactly how you pull it off. In WDS, you add the boot file, that's the boot.wim, from a Windows 10 source. And you can even give it a friendly name like Windows 11 Setup, just so you don't get confused. Then you add the main install file, the install.wim, from your Windows 11 source, and you just pick which editions you want to have available, like Pro, Home, whatever you need.
Okay, once that secret ingredient is in place, believe it or not, the hardest part is over. Now we just have to flip a few switches on our server to make sure everything goes off without a hitch on deployment day.
So we just got to tweak a few things. First, we tell the server to respond to any computer that asks for an install over the network, whether we've seen it before or not. Next, we tell it to just go ahead and always continue the network boot, no questions asked. And last, we tell it not to automatically join the computer to a corporate domain. This just gives us a bit more flexibility later on.
And that is literally it. You click Start on the WDS service and your Windows deployment factory is officially open for business. The assembly line is powered up and just waiting for computers to roll in.
All right, now comes the really satisfying part. You walk over to all those new computers, you turn them on, and you just tell them to boot from the network. It's usually called a PXE boot. And then you just lean back and watch. The computers find your server, they grab that Windows 10 boot file, and then they seamlessly start installing Windows 11. No USB sticks, no clicking through menus, it just works.
So let's zoom out for a second. What's the big deal here? I mean, why go through all this trouble to set up a server just for a sneaky workaround?
It all comes down to pure, unadulterated efficiency. We're talking about maybe 10 minutes of setup time. And then you can start deploying Windows 11 to every single machine on your network, all at the same time. Think about that. That's less time than it takes to even get the installation started on one machine the old-fashioned way.
Look, this is so much more than just a neat trick. This fundamentally changes how you work. You get incredible speed. You get consistency, because every single installation is a perfect clone, and you get scalability. The process is exactly the same whether you're setting up 5 computers or 500. A job that could take days now takes minutes.
You know, this whole thing is just a fantastic example of that classic tech spirit, right? You hit a roadblock, the manual says no, but with a little bit of clever thinking, you find a way around it. It really shows that sometimes the best solutions are the little hacks that save the day. So that makes me wonder, what's the most clever tech workaround you've ever had to come up with?